Hi, Raj.
Hi, Hannah. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe that we're doing this together, sweetheart. I mean, just for full transparency for all of the audience out there, I just want to be very, very fully transparent. And I want everyone to know that Hannah and I actually have a long-term professional relationship. She has been the editor-in-chief and still is of Anoki Life. And we've done various professional endeavors together, both inside the realm of Anoki and also outside, because she comes from a wealth of experience in the journalistic arena. So for anyone out there, I just want to make sure that you know that Hannah knows me on many unique levels. And I felt that, if somebody was going to ask me questions about who I am, what motivates me, and why I'm actually, launching this academy at this time when a lot of us are going through a lot of different experiences. And, it's really been an interesting year, to say the least. This is the right person to ask those questions, because she's known me for a long time and she's also known me on many different levels. So if there was ever anyone to pick to really kind of
Aw,
unravel,
thanks,
what
Raj.
this is all of course, my dear, what this is all about, it would be Henna. So take it away, my darling.
All right. Well, first of all, congratulations on your new venture, the Open Chest Confidence Academy. I think it's so incredible what you're doing, but I really want to kind of really dig deep and go back to where it began. So now, when it comes to where you're now, you refer back to the reason being is being able to overcome a traumatic chapter in your life. Now, I really feel it's important we talk about that because it gives full context of the achievements that you have made to this day. So let's begin there. You got married. It was a complete arranged marriage. Your textbook arranged marriage, in the sense that you did not know the person, and then you ended up moving to a country that you had absolutely no connection to, you'd never been to before. Paint that picture for me.
What a great place to start. Well, being a woman and being a woman, of color, coming from a very staunch and stark and, very, very kind of rules oriented kind of culture.
Yeah.
I already had all that baggage already, kind of coming to the early part of, my 20s. But then I was faced by this, whole idea of the arranged marriage system. And, being someone that, grew up in my teenage years in kind of that monochromatic environment that was of the 80s in England, where either you were white or you were black, and there wasn't really any identity in between that. I already had all of, the kind of different concepts of what it means to be who I am supposed to be versus who I felt inside that I was. So, when my parents, sprung this on me and, said that, it's your time to get married and we found, some suitables for you, I was so shocked. As much as I knew it was kind of coming, but I was shocked more from the perspective that, God, like, are they really going to do this?
Yeah.
Are they,
Is this really happening?
yeah, like, are they really going to do this? It's like, I was born in England and I was raised there. And, at that time in the 80s, England was really coming into its own finally, where you were starting to see people of color in between the monochromatic arena, people like you and I, Hannah, on TV. You were seeing us as entrepreneurs. You were seeing us starting to kind of hit that political arena. We were starting to get on the radar outside of our culture. So, facing this kind of very archaic idea of meeting someone and marrying them because there was a ordained or perceived fit just felt out of sorts for me. Like, it was a very confusing time anyway, because inside my home, I had to be a certain way. And outside of my home, I was, exposed to a very different environment. So already trying to kind of grapple with these two versions of myself was enough. And now you throw in the whole idea that they wanted me to marry someone that could look after me, which meant that I would then need to go into a very different environment again. So now like a third environment, just it really paid its toll on how I felt about myself.
So did they talk to you about this while you were growing up? You know, one day the time will come when we will pick and choose who it is you were married because it's in our culture and that's the way it is, and or it just kind of came out of nowhere for you?
I think it was a bit of both, to be honest, Henna.
Okay.
You know, we were exposed to an environment where, you know, really the parents kind of set the stage of who it is that we needed to be. My mom was very adamant that we knew how to cook. We knew how to iron clothes. We knew how to clean the house. She also made sure that our younger siblings were, you know, taken care of by the older siblings. And then being the second child of, you know, four daughters and then a son, it just seemed that, you know, we just needed to know how to be when we got married. But the
Mm-hmm.
whole idea behind the fact that I would actually not know the person, or I wouldn't have enough time to develop a relationship with them prior to getting married, was not on my radar whatsoever, because I lived in England. I lived
Yeah.
in the UK. I mean, you know, I was exposed to South Asians dating. So I
Yeah.
didn't think that it was something that would be so strict as it was for my parents.
So they told you that this is happening. Did they show you a photo? Did they tell you this is the person? Here's the bio data, like all of that stuff, and that was it. I mean, it was finalized.
So it wasn't quite that bad, but it was almost that bad. I was actually in Cardiff at that time, and I was pursuing higher education. I was doing a diploma, and I wanted to go into law. So I had gotten back, you know, 3 different universities, because in England at that time, the maximum university that you could apply for were 3.
Okay.
So all 3 of the universities that I applied to gave me a conditional offer based on me just passing my diploma. So
Yes.
I was so super excited, Henna. I was like, oh my God, this is where I'm going, right? I'm going to be my own woman, right? I'm going to change life for women, you know, so that they never have to go through, you know, the things that I've had to go through. And, you know, I had this kind of
Yeah.
really, I had this, you know, rose tinted glasses idea of what I felt my life was going to be. I never
Yeah.
ever actually really thought that I'd ever marry someone that I didn't love. And in order to love someone, you need to know them, right? Like it was never on my personal radar. And then what happened was, as I was almost closing out the diploma, um, you know, this family came from Montreal, Canada to London, where my older sister was married. And she also went through a very similar scenario with the arranged marriage being so strict. And, you know, they came looking for a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because they gave themselves 2 weeks to find a girl to marry their son to. This was actually told to me.
Yeah. No,
And
I'm not surprised.
it
Yeah.
was actually told to me, Hannah. And my sister was so excited, my older sister, because, you know, she'd gotten married and, you know, it was at the early stages of a marriage. So, you know, everything was kind of bubbly and rosy. And she wanted that for me. Like she wanted me to be happy, and she felt that's what I needed. And my parents made it quite clear that I was next on the radar. And so her eyes were open. So when she saw this dentist come in from, you know, Canada looking for a wife, she felt that I would be a great fit for that. My parents were insistent as soon as they heard that he was a dentist and he was from our culture. And not only was he from our culture, but he was also from our, you know, class and caste system. Like apparently all this matters. And so they thought, oh my God, how are we ever going to get an opportunity like this? So they took me kicking and screaming from my dorm in Cardiff to London to meet him that day.
Mm.
So I remember going in the car and thinking to myself, well, I'll just tell him that I'm not interested, that I don't want to marry him. So we get there, and what happens is, you know, it really was like you see in the movies. I mean, none of that's exaggerated at all, Henna. I mean, they took me upstairs into a room that had 2 chairs, and he was sitting on one chair. They told me to go sit on the other chair. They closed the door, and there we were, 2 strangers opposite each other. And I thought, and in my mind, I had this flash of, oh my God, I thought this only happened in Bollywood. You know, it was like, I couldn't believe that I was sitting there.
Wow.
And he also felt quite uncomfortable.
I'm sure.
Because it was kind of like, I came in with this major energy of attitude and that I don't want to be there. And I'm sure he picked up on it, because it was a nerve-wracking situation anyway. And then you get this woman with, you know, an attitude problem that comes and parks herself next to you. And back in those days, you know, I was very flamboyant, like so much more than I am today. Like, you know, different colored hair and different colored eye makeup and all, you know, wacky outfits. And I was also just out of my teens.
Yeah,
So,
no, exactly.
and, you know, and this was kind of like, you know, your late 80s and early 90s. So it was we were still coming out of the go big, go home 80s era. So, you know, that's kind of, you know, that's what he was exposed to. And he was exposed to when I walked in that room. And it was so interesting because he was the complete opposite. He was so straightforward and such a, you know, doctor, dentist looking kind of man, like very, very simple. I took one look at him and I thought to myself, how are we a match? You know, it was like, and this part was very comical.
Oh,
and that's basically how it happened. And then long story short, from there, we met there. And I remember saying to him that, can you just tell them that you're not interested in me? Because for me to tell them, they're not going to listen. It's too much pressure because I'm the girl. And he says, well, I want to marry you. So you will have to address that yourself. So second time I met him was when he came to where we lived in South Wales. And again, I just had such an attitude problem. I don't even understand why his parents would even have accepted, you know, this girl with attitude, with too much makeup on and wacky hair and like weird outfits, you know, because people in Europe, in England are a lot more flamboyant, you know, with the way we wear our clothes than they are in North America. I feel that kind of is starting to change, but still not quite there. Yeah. So picture 2 very stark, different personalities. And again, we were ushered into a room to make the final decision. And he says, you know, would you like to move forward? And, you know, at that point, what I thought to myself, Henna, like previous to them coming, my dad had said to me quite clearly, he said, you have 2 choices. Either you marry this guy or you leave. Those were my choices. Oh. And I'll never forget that he did that to me. Now, in hindsight, looking back at that, would he have actually done that? Probably not, because he's such a gentle soul, but he put it in such stark language to me as an ultimatum that at that time, I really believed that he meant it. I really did. So I went, so when I was in that room and you know, this gentleman asked me, you know, like, what do you want to do? Because I want to marry you and I'd like to make the announcement. I said to him right there, yes, I'll marry you. And the reason I said this to him was I thought I had 2 choices, but I didn't really. Both choices meant that I had to leave my house. But one choice meant that I didn't have any way to look after myself because I was a student. I had no way to take care of myself. The other way, I'm marrying a dentist. He's going to be able to take care of me. I'm not going to have to worry about what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we all have choices in life, Henna. And I'm not here to say that the choices that were put on me were right or wrong, or the choices that I decided to take for myself were right or wrong. It just was what it was. Right? It's what happened. Those were the choices that were taken, and my life brought me to Canada.
Okay, so now we're in Canada, and I want to ask you this: the wedding happened in Canada?
It did, and that's also a story. Because I had said that, you know, I will be fine marrying you when we were, you know, back home in the UK, but you know, I have 2 conditions. One is that the marriage has got to happen here because I'm the one that's having to leave everything to come over there. And then I said, the second thing is that I want to be able to stay here until our paperwork comes through. So that, because I knew that if I'd go to Canada, what would happen is that I'd have to wait for the paperwork. I wouldn't be able to work or go to school. I'd be away from my family. I'd be in a new country with a whole bunch of strangers. I knew that I would fall apart. So what happened was he said yes, that he would agree to that. But then when he went back home, the whole story changed. I know it wasn't him. I know he got a lot of pressure from his family, just because I know the kind of man he is. And he is the kindest, the most gentle man that I've ever met in my life, even till this day. If I need help, he's there for me. So I knew that it wasn't him, but it was absolutely made clear to me that the wedding was going to take place in Canada, and that I would need to stay there after the marriage. Like, I wouldn't be able to come back home because, what would people say?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now,
so the marriage took place in Canada.
So
with
now
400 people that I didn't know.
Yeah. Yes. So now the 400-person wedding happened, and all the festivities are done, and everyone went home. Now you are all by yourself with this new gentleman whom you've just met very briefly. You're newly married in a new country that you have no connection to. What were your first thoughts?
My family stayed for a week after the marriage was over. And during that week, I was actually quite angry. And I was angry because my family wanted to see me, but the family I'd married into had their own plans because, they have this new daughter-in-law and they want to show her off. They wanted to take me to many different people's houses and stuff. But all I could think about is, well, can't you just do that after my family goes? So I want you to think about this for a minute, Henna. So I get married in a strange country to a strange man where I don't know anybody. And I didn't have much experience, in terms of life in general, because the only traveling to that point I'd ever done was with my family, and it was always to India.
Yeah.
And, I never was even allowed to have a sleepover at friends' houses because in my parents' mind, it was, well, what are people going to say? They were always worried that something could be said against their daughter so that they wouldn't be able to get married. This was some kind of weird logic that they had in their heads. So think about how closeted I actually was, and then you put all of these layers of new experiences on me. And then that 1 week, Henna, that I had to just make peace and transition mentally from having my family with me to not having them, that was taken away from me as well. Like, they were literally a few kilometers away in another home for the whole week. And I believe that I was only able to see them twice. And I wanted to consume my entire week with them. I wanted to be able to have those conversations with my older sister, who I was really, really close to. And we never kind of really got that closure. And it makes me a little bit emotional when I talk about it, actually.
Yeah. So now, you were saying that you came from a very structured, strict household. Yes. And I can definitely relate to that. I completely know exactly what you're talking about. Were you ever concerned that you are moving from your world to a smaller world in your new home?
That's such a great question. I didn't actually know that that's what was happening, even though that's what was happening, because I hadn't had enough exposure to the world. I moved from a larger social world to a very, very tiny social world, because as I mentioned, in the early 90s, England, United Kingdom was really booming as far as, who we were as South Asians. We were really starting to come into our own, right? And then I came to, the Toronto region in Canada, and I felt like I was in my mother's generation. Is that people were wearing salwar kameezes when they'd go to people's houses, and everybody, including all the younger generation, was speaking, the native tongue. They weren't speaking English. And me, my upbringing is we very rarely wore Indian clothes unless it was a wedding or a very special occasion. And we always spoke English, whether it was to older people, whether it was to kind of, people of our age. But here I was in a family social environment where from the little kids to people my age, teenagers also, I was barely out of my teens myself, up to the parents, which of course they would speak the language.
Yeah.
Everybody just, the social gatherings were Indian clothes and speaking Punjabi. I'd never, ever experienced that. And my heart would pound.
Yeah.
And it probably pounded for probably a good 5 years into the marriage, because I couldn't understand where I was, like socially speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was in a village back home in India.
Mm-hmm.
It was so surreal. It was completely a different world. It was a different social world. It was a different cultural world. It was a different pop cultural world. Add that all in to the fact that I was in a different place with different people that had different ideology, and I came with so much of my own baggage on top of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, having gone through that, and especially at such a young, how old were you when you got married?
I was just 22.
22. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And at 22.
And you remember back in those days in the 80s and, early to mid 90s, Henna, that was the age that you were supposed to get married as a woman from our culture.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. And it totally. I mean, I even think that's on the higher end. Usually it's like 19, 20-ish.
Right.
Like either before.
Oh, I lucked out then, didn't I?
Yeah. You scored yourself a couple more years.
I did.
So now I wanted to ask you, and how long did the marriage last?
We were married actually for 10 years, sweetheart.
For 10
but
years.
We separated after 8.
After 8.
Yes.
When you decided to separate, I mean, how was that?
How did that come about?
How did that come about? Like, who made that? Was it a mutual decision, or was it something that you felt that you needed to do? How did that come about?
So let me preface that for you, Henna, just to give people context here, and I want to be fully honest about the experience of my marriage. I was married to, as I mentioned, the kindest man I'd ever met. I actually wasn't used to being treated well in this manner. And what I mean by well is as an equal, being asked my opinion as to, okay, how do you feel about this decision that needs to be made? Because in my household, it was always made by the elders. And although we felt that we had freedom because we got to wear makeup, we got to kind of do cool things with our hair, we got to wear clothes, this area, my parents would give us the freedom because it wasn't really doing any harm. But outside of that, we had no freedom at all. Here I was. And that's the other thing I want to kind of put out there. It wasn't all doom and gloom, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the doom and gloom part of it, but the emancipating part of it was that I was married to a man that allowed me to be. He adorned me. Anything I wanted, he gave me. He would take me on trips to far off lands that were the kind of things that you would see in movies. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, I'll give you an example. Our honeymoon, he took me to Nice, Saint-Tropez, San Rafael. He took me to the entire French Riviera. He took me to Paris and across to the Italian Riviera, back home to see my parents because we were in Europe, because he knew that I needed to see them. Okay, he was that thoughtful. And then he brought me back home. This was the kind of man I was married to. But, coming from the kind of family I came from, I didn't really have the tools to identify or know how to acknowledge that I was actually being given something magical. Like it was never, I've never been in a relationship. I had no idea that this wasn't the way that men usually are. Usually there was that whole idea that, you know, you get married, you have children, you clean the house, you know, you got to know how to cook. You got to, you know, always be, you know, hosting parties. It was this whole idea that I grew up with that I needed to be, right? But you know, this man, like I didn't get him. He wasn't like my father,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Wasn't,
yeah.
you know, like he wasn't like the man that I thought that I was, you know, going to be with. And he really wasn't the kind of man that I would have ever picked for myself. But I fell in love with this man during the marriage. I have to be very honest. Like when I look back at it, I mean,
Yeah.
his kindness, it was so difficult not to feel loved. The thing that went wrong in our marriage was that I'm quite flamboyant as a personality, as you know, and he is a lot more on the reserved side. So the more, you know, I got to the other end of my 20s, the more I came into myself because I had room to kind of start to figure out a little bit about what made me happy, right? Which kind of pulled me even more away from who he and I could be together. There was just too much room
Okay.
starting to get being created between us. And the other thing that kind of added to that was the fact that I spent 2 years after my son was born in Rochester, where I went to go study dental hygiene because my husband being a dentist, we decided to open up a practice, and it just kind of made sense that I'd be a part of that world from a professional perspective. So basically my son was 5 weeks old. I took him and my then husband's mum and dad, who were retired, and we all went to Rochester, got an apartment, and I stayed there for 2 years. And every now and again, I would come home. So this also then created, you know, a larger gap between
Of
myself and
course.
him, you know. And
Yeah.
so, you know, it was a lot. It was a
Yeah.
lot. And then, you know, I really came to a point where I just didn't like being in the relationship anymore because I was really starting to get this calling that I needed to explore who I was as a person, more so because you know, my role had changed. I became a mother.
Yes.
I had
Yes.
no idea who I was. So how would I have any idea how to raise this child to make sure that he didn't have to deal with all the traumas that I had to grow up with? Like, how could I be a nurturing mother, allow him the room to become the man that he wanted to be, but also to set rules
Yeah.
that would help him get there, because without rules there's chaos,
Of
right? Like,
course.
how
Yeah.
do you make that happen? How do you not be your parents, but then how do you not go completely the other way? I felt the only way I could figure that out was to figure me out, and I couldn't do it in the marriage.
So the marriage ended
Mm.
amicably, I assume.
I mean, you know, my husband didn't want the marriage to end. You know, he says, let's go try therapy. Like he's very much, okay, you know, he's a very much solution oriented personality.
Yeah.
He's a dentist, right? Very
Mm,
logical. Okay,
yeah.
what do we do? How can we solve this? There's got to be a way to solve this. This cannot be the only way to move forward. And we did go through that process, but I just had already checked out of
You
the
already
marriage
checked
by
out.
then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you need to find yourself. You need to figure out who you are. Were you ever scared that you might not find yourself? Did that thought ever occur to you?
That's a really good question, Henna. I think that what happened is that, you know, with the tools and the experiences you have at any given moment in your life, you think that the next goal for you in that journey is ABC. But then when you
Yeah.
get through that journey of ABC, then you realize it's another ABC.
Yeah.
So I think that what happened was that, you know, what I thought was going to be was, but then even that wasn't enough. So I
Yeah.
kept on this perpetual journey of trying to understand who I needed to be next. And I'm still on that journey.
You're still on that journey. Yeah. Yeah. That journey never ends. As much as we
But you don't
think
know
we
that.
figured it out, you don't know that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, it's
You
true.
think that, you know, if I get out of what I don't want, I can go find what I want. But then, you know, when you find what you want, you realize that it's not enough. And then you go
Yeah.
looking for something else. And so is the human condition for all of us, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I feel that we experience so many layers of trauma as humans, that there's a lot of work that can be done along that journey to help us actually not have as much trauma as we subject ourselves to. And I know that a lot of people, when I say that, a lot of people say, yeah, but, you know, things happen in life. You can't control what's going to happen to you and how you're going to react to it. But, you know, what I say is, when I look back at my life, I feel that you can. I feel
Yeah.
that you can't control what's going to happen to you, but you can decide how you're going to react to it and what you're going to do with it, if anything. I do believe that's in your hands, no matter what experience you're going through in life.
And I love how we ended it there, because I want to take that wonderful nugget of wisdom and fast forward to today.
Okay.
Okay, so now you are a multi-award winning, internationally acclaimed social media, a social entrepreneur, media marketing events, all of that wonderful, wonderful things you've done with Anoki Life and Open Chest. Now you are here with your latest venture, the Open Chest Confidence Academy. Now, first question I want to ask you about that is the idea. Was there a single instance that happened in your career or in your personal life where you decided, you know what, this is what I need to do professionally? I need to do this. Or was it a collection of experiences?
Well, you know, when I came out of the marriage, I did not have any rules. You know, I was in a place where I could do whatever I want, and I had a lot of ignorance about what that meant. That ignorance actually worked in my favor, because I did a lot of things that I didn't realize were not things that you should really be doing. And by default of that, I accomplished a lot of inroads and pioneered a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have if I knew better. So, you know, things like getting certain personalities on, you know, our print magazine with Anoki magazine back in its heyday. Like, I didn't know I couldn't, you know, that there's a process to putting Jennifer Lopez on your cover or putting Aishwarya Rai on your cover. I just would ask. And people would say,
Yeah.
how did you get them on the cover? I said, because I asked.
Yeah.
I just asked. And people would laugh and say, but, you know, like, really, that's what you did? I said, yeah, that's actually what I did. And even when I launched the awards, because I felt that, you know, people weren't recognizing creatives and artists and, you know, fashion designers and musical artists, that, you know, people from our culture, they were only really giving awards to rich corporates. And I felt that, you know, we needed to identify the one core thing that made our culture so magnificent and rich. And that is the art that comes from our culture for thousands of years. So, you know, I decided to put on an annual awards show, and I thought, who are the biggest stars? And I just contacted them, and they just came. And people were like, how are you accomplishing that? And again, in my mind, I didn't know that I couldn't. So therefore, I just did. So a lot of the ignorance of not being, you know, a business graduate, not having an MBA, right? Not having a journalism degree. I had no idea about the rules. I just literally thought to myself, this is what I need to accomplish. How do I get there from where I am? And I would solution my way. And that's been kind of a thing that has been a core quality of mine, is that I'm really good at finding ways to get to where I want. And I think that that's kind of really what people see in my journey is, you know, she's accomplished these things, but to me, it's like, well, you know, I was just trying to find solutions to where I wanted to get to, right?
And personally speaking, I have seen you firsthand being the person, the go-to person when someone has a problem. And you have this really wonderful way of being able to sit down with this person, whether it's a personal issue or a business issue or a career, they're stuck in a career situation or what have you. I've seen countless people will be at a party and someone will come up to you and ask you, listen, I got this, what do you think? And you would just, this is what you need to do. This is how to analyze it and this and that, and let me know how it goes. And let's, step by step and all of this stuff. I mean, it was just natural to you. And
Yeah,
that's why when I
right.
was,
I didn't think about it.
yeah, it was just, and as someone who is a bystander watching, I would see you in action and it would just be so fluid, like it would be so easy. And it was such a wonderful, easy conversation where this person kind of went with the problem. You guided them through the ways to get to the solution, and then you illuminated them on what the next steps are. And this is like over cocktails, and I was like,
Wow.
this is amazing. And so when I heard that you were opening up the Open Chest Confidence Academy, it was obviously, it was just no brainer for me. I thought, okay, yes, finally she's doing this, because she's always done it on such an intimate level.
Right.
So I believe that you are gifted this quality. I do believe that. My question for you is, do you believe that you are gifted this quality?
I feel that, and this may sound like a cliche, Hannah, but it just really is true. So I have to say it. I
Yeah,
feel that
yeah.
every single thing that I've gone through in my life has gotten me to exactly where I need to be. And that is to be in service to other people that need what I have to offer. And that's, I think, what it comes down to. I mean, I spent 20 years in the media and events, marketing, communication space. I've interviewed everyone that is anyone. I've done the biggest events. I've done all the glitz and glam and all the stuff that people, when they read on your bio, they say, wow, this person is successful. But what happened to me is that I actually went through a bit of a depression. Back in around 2016, for a couple of years, I gained a lot of weight. It was kind of around the time when, my mother also had a, personal health situation that happened. And my mother, being such a strong force in my life in terms of all the things I've seen her go through, and, seeing how she's found solutions to kind of get out of it. She's always been my rock and my hero. Like, there's never, ever been anyone that I've ever looked at in more awe than my mother, who came to England in the 60s, not knowing the language, having nothing. And again, coming into the same environment that I ended up coming into when I came into Canada. No family, no one. She came off the plane, and that's when she met my dad. It was like, so, there was a lot of similarities I saw in my mom's journey and mine. And, I know most, girls are usually daddy's girls, but I've always been a mama's girl. Like, it's always been about my mother. So it makes me a bit emotional when I talk about it. So you'll have to excuse me. But, 2016, there was just this moment when my mother went through a health thing. And, you'll excuse me a moment.
Take your time. Take your time.
And really, to be honest, Hannah, what happened was that it made me realize that all the things that I had accomplished thus far, like all these things, these check boxes that we all want, none of it meant anything to me. In that moment when I realized that I potentially could lose my mother, like the one person that I saw that I wanted to be like, the strength and all those characteristics, that I would like, one day I'm going to be like her. And then now one day she is not that woman anymore. And it's kind of like, it really is that rug that gets pulled from underneath everything that you believe in and everything that you've built the foundation of, your own security around. Because that's kind of what she stood for me. And as I mentioned, I gained weight. The successes didn't mean anything anymore. And I went on a quest very deeply inside of myself for a good couple of years to try and figure out, as you know about me, how do I solution my way out of how I feel about myself? Like, how do I do this? Because the last time I felt like this was on the plane to Canada, when I had to leave everything And that was the last time I actually felt this feeling that my life is completely not my own. I felt that again, Henna. So I think that what happened at that point for me was I started to go on a deep search to try and find all the things in my life that didn't matter. And one by one, I just wanted to remove them all, whether it be people in my friend circle, whether it be companies I don't want to work with because, you know, what they believe in is not what I align with. Whether it was a direction that my brands were going in that I felt was too fake, you know, and I wanted it to be more meaningful and more community oriented. So a lot of things, you know, parallel, you know, to the changes and shifts that were happening in me, where I was now pushed to stretch again to that next level of growth, like I was 20 years prior. And it brought me on this journey where I started to, you know, look into other alternative ways to see how I could make myself happy again. Like, you know, I started to explore things that you never explore, you know, things like, what is happiness? You know, why am I not happy? Am I ungrateful? These are the things that, you know, we're brought up to believe should make us happy, like money and fame and, you know, a long resume. And I felt empty and hollow because it just wasn't enough. And I think that what I realized on that journey, and serendipitously what started to happen along that journey as I was trying to refine another version of me, corporate, you know, C-suite, you know, middle management executives started to come to me and ask me to coach them in, you know, media, in marketing, in how to present themselves, how to kind of talk about what their brand needs to represent. And so I started to coach these, you know, these executives, and that made me open up kind of a boutique enterprise under my Open Chest umbrella, because, you know, Open Chest for me was always about me and Anoki life for me, and which has seen many micro pivots along the journey, which have been predicated on kind of the growth and twists and turns that have happened within the community it says, which is the South Asian community. I felt it needed to sit under that umbrella of Open Chest, and just the idea of what that's always meant to me when I started it back in 2002 was I wanted it to be real and honest and non-judgmental. I wanted it to be a place where whatever was talked about, it would be a safe environment so that we could actually truly get to the crux of what it is that we need to talk about as humans. And so it was always a service-based brand. And the reason why the Open Chest, you know, confidence coach came along, that was me, I called myself that, was I wanted to be able to get the crux of what it was that was right for the person I was coaching. And I feel that kind of that kind of gave me purpose and meaning, because I started to see massive shifts in these people when I started to work with them, because I came at it not from a tactical skill-based perspective. I came at it from a interviewer perspective. Like I would, you know, I'd want to discover who they are. I wanted to get to the crux of, are you actually asking me for what it is that you really want? Or is this what you're coming to me with, just sitting on the surface of where you need to go? So I would always start and insist on having my coaching sessions for the first couple to be discoveries, you know, where I would kind of really want to understand them. And the reason I did that is I feel that to understand the depths that even people don't understand it, because you don't get it until you start talking about it. It's not a reality in your mind.
So true.
Until you start talking about it, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what happened. And I found that, you know, through that, then I went into my bag of goodies, you know, my bag of experience and skills that I'd learned along the way, all the innovative things that I'd done because I didn't know that I couldn't, not having the rules that would stop me from finding a solution because I didn't over-educate myself. And that's like a whole other, you know, topic that I believe in. I do believe that if you over-educate yourself on what other people are telling you the way things should be, that it kind of stunts you from having any room within your own being to be able to educate yourself from personal experience and educate yourself from a place of being creative. Because I feel true business acumen comes from a place of creativity first. Mm-hmm. If we set rules around the creativity, I feel that we box ourselves into a lesser version of what our business could actually be. Like, I think you need to think bigger. And to do that, you need to have no rules in that ideation phase of, creative process. So these were the kinds of things that I brought to the table. And these executives are used to, having rules and regulations and having degrees and having PhDs and, and being stuck in these kind of stratified corporate environments, that all of a sudden they get a shot of me and they're like, their brain explodes. They're like, what is going on? Right? And it's kind of like when you were a kid. I mean, people are gonna be like, oh my God forbid this ever happened. But in our culture, this happened, right? Like, if you're naughty, you get a slap on the face. That's just the way it was, right?
It is, yeah.
So it's kind of that same feeling that, you're going along in your merry way, and all of a sudden your mom comes along and she gives you a slap on the face, and it kind of jolts you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're forced to be in your mother's environment rather than in the environment you were in.
That's a really great way of putting it. It forces you to be in the other environment.
Yes. And so that's what I would do. Like, what I wanted to do is I wanted to make their mind explode a bit so that there was room for me to go in. Because if your mind isn't open, you can't work with someone like me. Because I don't come with an MBA. I don't come with the stratified rules. Everything that I've done has been through innovative, creative, solution-oriented experience. And that's what I bring to the table.
Now, my question for you here is, because I know this because I personally went through a coaching session with you. So I know one of the things that you wanted me to discover, it was a discovery, is recognize the qualities that I have.
Mm-hmm.
My question, so obviously you have qualities which are inherited,
mm-hmm.
and you have qualities which you've developed through the years of wisdom from working, life experiences, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Can certain qualities be born out of coaching?
Absolutely. So I'm a firm believer, because I have, proven this case in point over and over again in my life, and also since 2017 with clients that I've been working on one-on-one, because my coaching practice up until now has been one-on-one. I'm a firm believer that if you can come with an open mind, if you are willing to do the work, and if you are willing to trust in someone that has something, an idea that's different from something that you would ordinarily allow yourself to be exposed to, I feel that's the crux of being a person that can be taught something. I really believe that, Henna. And it's what I've kind of built the foundations of the academy around, because everything else can be taught. If you don't have an open mind, right? If you're not willing to, allow somebody and trust them to take you on a journey, if you're not willing to do the work as you're walking that journey, right, you'll never be able to get to that next level in your life. I really believe that you won't, or it'll just be serendipitous because something else happened in your life. But the formula is what I just mentioned to you. Then I feel anything is teachable. So I feel that that's the part that needs to be worked on first. After that, it's tactical skills, it's academic skills, right? You'll do that stuff if you can first do this. So that's kind of, that's my answer to what you're saying there. There is nothing that you cannot be taught or that you cannot learn if you just come with that in mind.